What's up, Conquerors? This is a video for how to go from gold to conqueror rank part 2. If you haven't watched part 1, that's kind of required to begin this video, which is part 2. So I'm going to leave a link down in the description, so if you haven't watched part 1, you can watch that before starting this video. If you enjoy this video, drop a like, subscribe to the channel. If you want to support the channel, click join below. And without further ado, let's get into it. What's up, Conquerors? The first thing we're going to talk about here is mastering your early game. And I think the general conversation around early game and feudal pressure isn't talked about enough. And if you really wanted to go quickly from gold to conqueror, probably the best strategy that you could learn, practice at, and utilize on the rank ladder to get you to a Conqueror 1 rank would be early feudal aggression. A lot of players in lower to mid leagues don't defend well, they don't deal with feudal aggression well, and they don't expect it. Most players, when they play against another player, they're just passive. I mean, that's the easiest way to say it. Most players are just passive. So if you really learn feudal aggression, and even if you're not learning feudal aggression specifically, we can just say mastering the early game. If you can become a master of the early game, then you're going to climb on the ladder, okay? Doesn't matter whether you're doing feudal aggression, fast castle, 2-town center. You know, for example, feudal aggression, you'll have a quick game plan to pump out units and attack. Fast castle, you know you're going to have to get a dark age on your gold. You might need a couple units to defend while you get to your fast castle. Second town center, you know, you've got your clean build for your second town center to come up, and then you can either pivot into castle or build units based on what you need. So the most important thing you can do in your gameplay is become an absolute master at the early game, right? Because it doesn't matter if you're a good late gamer. Doesn't matter if you're good at playing in Castle Age. Doesn't matter if you're really good with your macro and post-imp and getting an army up with siege in it. None of that matters if you don't get through the first 10 to 15 minutes of the game, okay? If you're dead at 10 minutes, it doesn't matter how good of a player you are when you're post-imperial. So I am going to show a recording here at 2 speed just so we can talk through it quickly of a feudal aggression play I did. To be fair to the other player here, this is a terrible matchup for Byzantine. It's just an easy example for me to show. And, you know, my early game, especially playing Mongol, is much better than my late game. It just is. I'm not a good late game player. But I end a lot of games early, or I build enough advantage early that I can then win in the late game, right? So, if your real goal is just to climb the ladder, then mastering the early game is going to help you a ton, right? So we're going to watch some gameplay footage here and talk through it. Of course, the most important thing, and I probably say this in all videos, if you're trying to master your early game, is having a good build order for your civilization. You know, whether that's Mongol, Byzantine, Juji, there's new civs coming out. Content creators will be making specific build orders as they learn more about those civilizations. So you kind of need more than one build order for your civilization. So it's kind of civilization dependent. So if I'm playing Mongol, you know, there's different builds I'd use. For example, if I'm playing against Byzantine, I'm going to go Dark Age Rush, as you'll see here. If I'm playing against English, I'll do something different. If I'm playing against, you know, Abbasid, I'll do something different. If I'm playing against French, like, as you play and get comfortable with your civilization, there's just different builds you'll do depending on the civilization you're facing, right? Like, I have a different game plan against Rus. I wouldn't Dark Age Rush Roost, because that doesn't make much sense. So you'll see here, because I'm playing Mongol and applying some pressure here, decide to tower the wood line and just harass the gold with the spearmen. And the reason you have to have a really clean build early is because you don't want to have to think about what you're doing with your macro right now, where your villagers should be, right? There should be no thinking in the early game macro here. You know how many villagers you need on each resource, right? I know I need 10 villagers on food, so I can get enough for the age up. I know how many villagers I'm going to use to build the landmark. I know how many I want on gold right now. I know how many I want on wood. Because I'm focused on, obviously here, Dark Age rushing. But normally, you should be focused on your scouting. And your scouting is actually very crucial to your overall gameplay. So you should master your build order. You should never even think about your build order. It's just something you do, right? You don't have to think about how many villagers you're putting on each resource. You just know, okay? Now, second most important thing early game is scouting. And every sheep you do not get, your opponent gets, right? So every sheep's 200 food. So if there's 20 sheep on the map and your opponent gets 15 and you get 5, he's got 10 more sheep. He's got 2,000 more food under his town center than you have. So what does that mean long term? Long term, that means you've got to move out on food earlier, or you have to build farms earlier in your base, whereas your opponent does not have to do that. Okay? So that's just kind of mastering the early game. You need a really clean build order, and you need to scout effectively. I've got some other videos on scouting you can go check out. You need to scout effectively to basically get the sheep edge. Sometimes there's a random spawn, not a lot you can do. So you're going to see me go full feudal here. Just disclaimer, you don't have to do feudal aggression. I think it's super potent if you want to get to conqueror rank. Feudal aggression works really well. But, if you want to play a more boomy style, you just have to learn how to defend. And I'll do a defending clip later in this video. So, if you're a feudal aggression guy, you get a clean build order, learn how to do feudal aggression. If you're a boomy guy, learn how to do your 2-town center. If you're a fast castle guy, get the build order for your your fast castle, your tower on your gold. For example, you're playing against Mongol. A lot of the time you're going to get Dark Age rushed. So you kind of have to have a plan already of what do I do when I get Dark Age rushed by Mongol. Okay? So tower and gold's the most common if you're going a fast castle civ, just so people can't apply feudal pressure on you. Like, if you were fast castling against French, you'd tower your gold, make a few spearmen. So we can see here, even the top, I don't want to say top, even very high level players, when applied with a lot of pressure, have difficulty, right? So we're watching a feudal pressure game here. No Mangadai. I say that. I made 2 Mangadai, so I really just kind of faked the Mangadai, went straight into Mass Archer here, because I figured he'd go Javelin or Longbows or something like that. And what the feudal pressure does for you is your economy's untouched, right? So I have map control. I can go out on deer. I don't even need a tower on the deer right now, because this guy can't leave his base, right? So I'm in a great situation here. I've got map control. I'm a kind of a multi-prong attack guy, so I attack from the front and then the back when you're paying attention to the front, so you get some villager kills. And all these really add up pretty quickly, right? So my macro on the back end, even if it's not perfect, I've got some latitude. I've got more villagers. I can go out on the map for deer. I don't have to go into farms early. My early pressure here is force the guy into farms. Has all of his attention's on his base, right? He's so focused on his base, he can't even think about counter raiding me. He's just in survival mode right now, right? So I do think something that's pretty useful when you're defending is just these outposts, just so you can garrison some villagers and some walls on the back side, which he doesn't, get any up because he's under a lot of pressure. But some walls on the back side help a lot to just kind of funnel your opponent's attack. You know where the opponent's attack is going to come from. And since I have so much pressure, you can kind of see he can't really move out onto what he would want to do as Byzantines, his further out berries or his deer. Since he goes into cisterns, he's a bit behind on the military. And so even in my play, you can see, I idle my town center a good bit. And, that's something I need to get a lot better in my early play. So, early play, depending on the civilization you're playing, you want that clean build order, good scouting. And then if you're going to stay in feudal, you get all your upgrades, and you never let your town center idle, because idling your town center in that early game's really punishing. Like, you're basically just losing out on free resources and economy when you just idle your town center. It's really, really a bad habit. You're losing games that you shouldn't lose when you're doing that. So, as far as mastering your early game, I think that's a pretty good, broad overview. That's just the tip of what you need to do. Now, if you have questions about how to do that for your strategy, I'm happy to answer those questions. This is a broad start to a video that will get more specific. But as far as how are you going to move from going from gold to conqueror, how do you make that jump? Gold to platinum, platinum to diamond, diamond to conqueror. I can guarantee if you're in gold and you really focus on your early game, mastering your early game, you're going to get better. I can definitely guarantee that, because I've watched and I've coached and I've played with a lot of gold players, and that's something they're just not very good at, right? Is just that early game. And even if you have a build order, it's just what are you supposed to do in that early game. So if you have questions about that, happy to answer them. Each strategy you do different things as far as feudal, where basically you get down unit producers, make counter units, raid, do a feudal push, fast castle, tower on gold, try to get to castle, 2 town center, clean build for your 2 town center, and then you either go castle or make units. So if you can master your strategy in the early game, very confident that you're going to climb in rank there. So if you have any questions about mastering the early game, just let me know. I'm quite the early game feudal aggression guy, so I have a lot of insight and I think good knowledge on how to do that. What's up, Conquerors? The next thing I want to talk about, which I really think most players don't do in their games, is make siege. And I'm not talking about rams. I'm talking about the big boys. Okay? I'm talking about Springalds, mangonels, trebuchets, cannons, also known as bombards. Sometimes even ribaldquins. So what I see a lot of players do is, and this is normally mid to late and late game where you're going to make siege, right? Because you can't even make siege until the castle age anyways. So you're not going to be making siege in feudal. And rams are technically siege, but I'm not counting rams in this section of the video. Siege is super, super important. Okay? Siege is expensive. Siege workshops are expensive. Siege weapons themselves are expensive. Sometimes siege can be very easy to snipe, which also makes players not want to invest into siege that they feel like they can't defend. But I'm here to tell you that if you start making siege in your mid to late game and late game, you're going to win a lot more games. Now, why is that? And I kind of want to talk about each siege weapon here. So, first we've got the Springled. And the Springeld's changed a lot over the years of Age of Empires 4. And right now, it's basically just a melee infantry killer. Right, so the Springeld's not really good for a whole lot else. If you don't know a lot about the Springeld's basically just a ballista, and its ballista bolt can shoot through multiple enemies, right? So if there's a line of infantry, the Springald will shoot, and it pierces through multiple enemies, right? I mean, that makes sense. It's a freaking ballista bolt. Now, it does bonus damage to melee infantry. I'll populate the stats here. And the Springeld's really, really effective against melee infantry. So, it's a bit situational, okay? I would say this. Let's say you're playing against someone like the Japanese. And they're not building Yumis, they're not building horsemen. Let's say they're just going, you know, full melee Japanese mass. They got spearmen, they have samurai, they have onobageshas. They're just spamming them. It's probably a good time for you to go into Springalds, right? So you still have to have something to protect your Springalds. You know, ideally, anytime when you make siege, you have a melee front line to protect your siege. A lot of the time, that's going to be spearmen. A lot of the times you need spearmen to protect your siege because they'll use horsemen to dive your siege, okay? So just kind of got to get that out of the way. But if the Japanese melee blob is coming your way to destroy you and your entire base, your family, your wife, your kids, you need to start making Springalds. And Springalds will absolutely destroy these big melee masses, okay? So out in the open field, Springalds are still good against melee masses. Inside of city blocks, where infantry gets really bunched up, Springalds will absolutely devastate an enemy army, okay? So, if you're going against a lot of melee infantry, remember, in the back of your head, make Springalds. Not just one Springald, many Springalds. Next, I want to talk about the Mangonel, okay? As a lover of Mangonels, I'm going to tell you right now, you need to build more Mangonels late game. Okay? Mangonels are a true force multiplier. What I mean by that is, you know, you have 200 pop. You can only build so many units with 200 pop. Now, I can't remember exactly how much pop a Mangonel takes. I want to say it's 3. I'll put it on the screen. But would you rather have 3 more archers or 3 more horsemen against an archer blob that the enemy has? Or would you want a Mangonel? Because I'm going to tell you, if you get a front line late game and you've got 3 glorious Mangonels back there, they can annihilate some ranged blobs. So what you're really going to find, you know, previously we talked about mastering the early game. In mid to late game and late game where you have a lot of resources, Siege wins you games. Like, Siege is the force multiplier. You have a force and it can go head on and stalemate the enemy. You add Siege to that bad boy, you push through. No problem. Okay, Siege is a force multiplier. Springalds kill melee infantry. Mangonels kill ranged infantry. Yes, ranged infantry can snipe them, but they do kill them. Okay? The only I'm going to say this with one caveat. The only ranged unit that you probably shouldn't make Mangonels against are Imperial longbows, because they'll just snipe them from out of range. Okay? So just keep that in mind. That's probably not going to work. But against like a normal archer range mass, you just snipe a lot of them down. Like archers, crossbows, hand cannoneers. Mangonels will deal well against them. In Castle Age next, we have the Trebuchet, famously quoted as being a Trebuchet by some streamers in the Age of Empires 4 community. I don't actually like Trebuchets that much, I'll be honest with you. What they are really good at in this game is like the slow grinding push. Like if you're stalemated out with your enemy, especially in Castle Age, and you just want to hit them from really far away, Trebuchets are great for a slow grinding push, right? They have super long range. They're hard to snipe out because of that. You can sit behind your defenses and trebuchet your enemies down. There's actually a cool little trick where you can, keep inching your walls forward, your palisade walls forward, probably even stone, and keep trebucheting over them so your trebuchets cannot get sniped easily, right? So you can kind of do this slow grinding push with trebuchets that really is pretty devastating. Now, the Bombard is really kind of your Age 4, your Imperial siege push weapon, right? It's interestingly still decent against units just because of its high damage. It is quite useful against elephants if you ever get in that situation. You'd be surprised, but Bombards do have a bonus damage against the elephants. And it's just your go-to siege weapon once you've hit Imperial to bring down buildings, right? So if you're in a stale melee game, you need to push through your opponent's buildings, you can't quite break them, build the Bombard. Build 2 of them, build 3 of them, however many you need. Again, very expensive. Your siege are your VIPs. As I once heard Aussie Drongo say, you never want to let your siege get killed once you make it. You should sacrifice 500 spearmen to protect your Mangonel. Okay? Your Mangonel must live. Your Bombard must live. Your spears are expendable and can die. Your siege is not. Siege is expensive and takes a long time to make and is slow. Now, one of my favorite siege weapons, which I don't use a whole lot, especially since the Mongols don't have them, is the Rebaldquin. Now, the Rebaldquin is very, very situational. I don't advise building it in most situations, because it can easily be sniped from range units, because it's got a short range and weak ranged armor. So, if you're ever facing someone who's making them, shoot it with archers. Now, it's super useful against someone who is also using a full melee comp. Unlockable in Imperial Age, you can definitely use your Rebaldquins against melee blobs as long as you have a front line, and the Rebaldquins will absolutely melt them. That's literally anything melee, like horsemen, knights, melee infantry. Rebaldquin will do fantastic. So, end of the day lesson of this section is really in Imperial Age, but sometimes even in Castle Age, your mid to late game and your late game, siege is a force multiplier. You need to learn how to use it, learn how to protect it. It will win you games in the late game. Alright, any questions about that section? Let me know in the comments below. Happy to answer. What's up, Conquerors? So, I'm going to do a little pretty basic tutorial here on how to defend. So I'm going to have one clip here and then have a second clip on how to defend a second town center. This first clip's going to be some pretty general how to defend your base, right? Like defense 101 kind of stuff. So we're against an intermediate AI here. We're going to mostly just kind of ignore the AI and just do a few things in our base that I want to show you. So the first thing I want to talk about as far as defense and how defense works, we're not really talking about timings and when you should do things here yet, okay? What I want to talk about first is outpost placement, all right? So outpost placement is largely dependent upon what civilization you're playing against. And let's say we have a gold mine out here and we want to protect our gold mine, right? So let's say we've got 4 to 5 villagers on the gold mine. Only 5 can garrison an outpost. So if you've got more than 5, you probably want 2 outposts. If you've only got 5 or less, you can roll with 1. Something important to understand is we'll start in Dark Age, okay? So we're going to kind of talk through a couple of different civs that might attack your gold mine. We can start in Dark Age. And the fact is, if a Mongol player wants to build an outpost and deny your gold, he can. Okay? You building an outpost out here does not block him from coming to the other side and building an outpost over here. And he'll still be able to hit your gold. Okay? So outposts are very good for denying spear rush in Dark Age, but they are bad at denying tower rushes. Okay, there's a difference there. You would need 2 outposts to actually deny a tower rush. Now, if they're just sending spears at you, getting an outpost up here is fine. If the spears come in, you can garrison in the outpost and you'll be totally fine, right? So that's kind of the Dark Age rundown. I guess one more thing I'll add in Dark Age, you can see the radius of the town center and where it shoots. So if they're not tower rushing and they're only going to spear rush you, you can actually just build some walls out like this. And that's going to solve all your problems as far as the spears go. So the spears can sit out here and burn the wall or do whatever. Like let's say you're playing against, I don't know, House of Lancaster, or someone did a weird spear rush with H or E against you or something like that. And you know that a villager's not coming, only spears are coming. You can build some short walls like this to protect your gold mine. And the spears can't walk around and attack you because they'll be walking through your town center range. You'll just garrison and kill them. Okay? Now, if they bring out a villager, this is something you just have to scout this, right? Normally, if someone still has 3 villagers on wood, that means they are going to build a tower. Watch this guy end up attacking me. That means they are going to end up building a tower, and in that case, these little walls don't work well, right? So this really only works well if they're just spear rushing, which you'll see Japan do as well sometimes to throw you off. Now that we're kind of done with the Dark Age tutorial, there's kind of 2 schools of thought of where you're going to place your outposts, okay? So let's say you're getting rushed by feudal rush by a civilization, and you want to go fast castle or something like that. You want an outpost on your gold, or you just want to be safe. Holy crap, I already got another scout. And you want to put an outpost on your gold to be safe. So, if we're playing against civilization like House of Lancaster or English, maybe if we're playing against even Mongol with Mangudai and Khan's hunters, a lot of the time we want to put this outpost on the outside, right? And we could even change our mining camp here, and what we would do is you'd have an outpost out here, you'd have your mining camp there, and then when you aged up, you would get a little bit of stone, 50 stone for most civs, you'd get arrow slits, and you've got great coverage from this outpost. Okay? Now, why do I say put it in the front out here? The other thing you could do if you want to just defend against the longbows themselves, just the longbows, you should put the tower all the way in the front of the gold mine, arrow slits. That defends against longbows really well, right? Now they got to walk all the way around, and this is kind of the only spot they can be, and you can kill them behind your base. Of course, it's more difficult to garrison in the towns or in the outpost at that position. Now that's super good against archers, right? To have the tower out in front with arrow slits is very strong against archer units. It's not good against knight units, right? So very effective against archer units. Now, if I'm over here mining and knights charge in from this direction, they can get in between my villager and the outpost now. So that's a bad setup against knights. Like, really bad setup. If I'm playing against knights and this is my mining camp position, I normally want to put the tower behind me. Now, you might say, why do you want to do that? Well, it's most likely that the knights are going to come from up top here or from the left. And I can run my villager to my tower without interference from the knights. And then my villager's alive. Ta-da! Seems pretty basic, right? So a lot of the time with towers, if I'm defending against longbows or archer rush or something like that, I'll put the tower out in front with arrow slits. If I just need a tower to be safe from knights, a lot of the time I'll put the tower at the back so I can garrison in the tower there and not get intercepted by a knight on my way to the tower. Now, you can always do a combination of walls with your tower. I don't hate that. Something I like doing a lot, actually, is using some small walls to kind of funnel the attack of the opponents, right? So, if we're early on, we know we're going to get rushed, we can do some walls like this. And that kind of funnels the enemy into some certain areas where they're going to attack. I mean, they could even eventually break this wall down, right? Because it's kind of far out. So, if you really even wanted to, you could do like a wall here. Now, this wall from tree to gold mine, I like a lot. You could still put an outpost right here. You still have room to put an outpost at the front or the back. Pretty solid, right? That's a very solid defensive position. Very safe from archers. If the knights are going to try to charge you, they have to run all the way around the gold mine to try to hit your villagers. So like this right here, really good, strong defensive position. Now, villagers love locking themselves out of walls. Now, I also, normally I'd put the wall farther out, but I also like even doing short walls just like this, especially if you're playing against someone who wants to raid you with cavalry. The point being, they've got to run through the town center range, right? So I kind of always want to build walls that funnel my enemy through town center range. I never want to give them easy passage to my villagers without them running through my town center. Okay, it's kind of different like later in the game when you expand out on the map and you have outposts and stuff like that, right? So at the beginning, you kind of want these small walls. You don't want to try to do, beginning, you don't want to do any giant walls across the map like this. It really doesn't work well, and you don't have the army to defend that. Mid-game, you start getting bigger walls. Late game, you get some walls across the map. For now, at the beginning of the game, you kind of get these small walls. So small walls like this, again, protect super well against cavalry. Now, if they have archers, the walls being this close in can be dangerous because they can shoot over the wood line. Uh-oh. AI intermediate castaways. See? That's why you apply early feudal pressure. You shouldn't let them boom like that. I only have 6 villagers. So, that's kind of a 101 on defending, in my mind. If you're getting pushed, also, textiles, very important. Technology. Wheelbarrow as well, super important early. And what you see a lot of the better players do if they're getting pushed is they just archer up. They just build a ton of archers to defend the base and rotate back and forth to resources. If there's a few, resources out here, they'll just rally units out here, and then when the knights come around, they can pivot between the resources. So, the one thing with spears against knights, you never want to chase knights around really with spears around the map. You kind of just want to keep moving the spears in between your resources here to defend. Because they're not going to catch the knights, right? They're just a lot slower. So you kind of pivot your army between your important resources. Tower helps you out with that as well. So that's kind of defense 101. If you're going to get better at the game, if you're going to get to the conqueror level, you got to learn how to defend your base, right? Like, even if you're going to be a feudal aggression guy like myself, I'm pretty damn good at defending. So, you got to learn how to be able to defend your base. Infantry are fantastic at defending your base. Cavalry need to go raid, but like infantry are MVP units at defending the base, especially when you're fighting within your defensive structures. So, kind of another defense 101 tip, which we'll talk about more later, is you always fight within your defensive structures, okay? You don't go out here and take a fight. You don't go out here and take a fight. You don't go out here and take a fight. You fight within your defensive structures, right? That's your bonus while you're defending. Alright, now that we've finished that, I think I'm going to pull a clip up. Holy crap. Oh, I think I set the resources to max. That's how he already got to imp. Sorry to be distracted by that. I've got a clip of some defense I did here the other day. I kind of wanted to talk through and add to this video. So this will kind of be, you know, we just did Defense 101, how to defend. And let's kind of do Defense 102 in this next clip. Let me know if you guys have any questions or thoughts or comments or anything to add about Defense 101. Thanks for watching. What's up, Conquerors? We're about to do some Defense 102 on how to defend against feudal aggression push. Okay, so here in the red, we've got our English player. He's gone multiple, or just two town center against our Knights Templar guy on 1 TC. He's got double Pilgrim, so he's going to be bringing in a ton of gold, and he's going a feudal all-in play against his second town center. And so this is just a little bit of Defense 102 to kind of piggyback on what we talked about in the last game. So you can see here, there are some walls going up to cut off just the sides for our red player. Pretty much wants to make sure that these Chevaliers, basically feudal knights or any cavalry, are not going to hit the flanks. Wants to turn this into kind of a top-down, straightforward push rather than having to defend multiple sides. So the gold is at the front. There's not any other easily accessible gold on the map for red. So, you know, there's one gold way out here, and then the rest of his gold's all front in the base where yellow's already identified and can attack. So that's kind of what the feudal push is over, is deny the gold, deny the castle age, destroy the second town center. So as the game goes, red's gonna scale more and more villagers, and so yellow's goal here is destroy the second town center, kill a bunch of eco, play the game from there. Like, either you win at that point or you go castle and then you win. So that's the goal. You know, on the attack, we have Horseman Archer, which almost always beats Spearman Archer, but these are longbows, so you have to keep that in mind. Longbows deal extra damage, and Chevaliers actually have less armor. So we're going to watch a few things. This push kind of happens over the course of multiple pushes. So if you're defending, ideally, you want to be able to snipe out his archers with your archers, and then your spears get on the cavalry. That's the ideal position. English is super turtly, so better town centers, longbows, Avia Kings. If you know you're going to get pushed, I think, you know, textiles is always the move here. No wheelbarrow in yet, that's a bit of a mistake, but textiles, the plus 25 HP makes a big difference. Quick swig of water, been shooting a lot of videos today, so kind of what you want to see in this defense is spearmen get on the horse. Spearmen probably went out a bit far here, and then longbows on the archers. And once he pushes into the second town center, trying to do a little counter raiding here, which is never a bad idea. Once he pushes into the town center, what you want is the town centers garrisoned by villagers so they can hit the enemy army. And, this is a big and, villagers on the backside repairing this town center from the ram damage. So you want villagers repairing this town center, and then from this town center, you want to pop the 8 villagers in and out to help burn the rams. You don't really want your units killing the rams. You want your units fighting their army while you use villagers to burn the rams. It's super, super important, right? Army always needs to kill army. I say always. Almost always needs to kill army, because the army is the threat. You can always kill the rams later, alright? And the game is not over if you lose the second town center, even though you'd like to keep it. So the biggest thing is you need to kill his army, because he can always go back and make more rams. Villagers need to work on burning rams. You know you have a villager lead from 2 town center, so like it's not the absolute end of the world if you lose some villagers trying to burn the rams, okay? So he's gonna have a problem with the Chevaliers here. You know, probably want to pull more villagers here This woodline probably needs to go back here, which red's going to do now. Probably need more villagers trying to repair the town center just because it's 3 rams. But you want to repair on the backside, have villagers in both town centers to shoot the enemy. And you can see under the fire of the town center here, this is difficult for yellow to keep up a push. Villagers pop out to burn rams, which is pretty huge. Army fights army. Wow. And you see how hard it is to kill these villagers when you have textiles? Look at how close this town center was. The plus 25 HP on a villager makes a huge difference because nothing has bonus damage against villagers, right? So villagers don't necessarily have good armor, but they are difficult to kill when they have 75 HP. So 2 rams go down to villagers here. 3rd ram goes down to villagers. Yellow gets 4 villager kills, loses 3 rams and a bunch of army. Okay? So I think in this situation, if you're 62 to 39, you probably take killing 3 rams for 4 villagers, right? So, you know, obviously the macro is a little screwed up from red right now. Like, you'd like to see better macro here. Probably not even wise to go back out to the gold. Unless you needed some... I did need some blacksmith upgrades, actually. Needs the +1 range. So, I think yellow's going to get ready for round 2 here. Clearly trying to get enough for iron undermesh. But the rams come back in. And if you are doing a ram push in feudal, the one thing to understand is you always need 3 rams. 2 is not enough. So you saw 3 rams, really probably should have brought down the town center just then. And one of the good things about pushing, and when you're on the defense, you need to remember always to make more villagers. But when you're pushing, you can kind of throw your opponent off there. Another kind of defense 101 thing is if you can't get the resources in your base, you can see red's going to at least attempt to get out here. So red should probably send some units with his villagers just to be safe. But a lot of the time, if I'm really getting pushed at home, I try to get resources on the flanks. Like, that's super important, right? Like, deer here, gold out there. Yellow's not doing a very good job of covering. He's got the gold covered here, but didn't cover the gold farther out. So you try to get the resources you can on the flanks. Now I'll just go and mass longbow, but you can see here, yellow's got a huge army. Fighting under the town center is going to be difficult, right? So English have the super town centers. Villagers get pulled to kill rams again. You really just want to pop in and out with the villagers. Villagers get pulled to repair again. Now, longbow's fighting the archers as much as they can. Villagers come out to burn rams. This is, again, this is defense, your defense 102 right here. Army's fighting army. Villager repair on the back to save the town center. Villagers get pulled to burn the rams, right? So, a lot of villagers lost by red at this point. But is successfully beating the push again. And you can see the destroyed value difference. I think I have the entire screen shared here. Destroyed value difference is insane at this point, right? So, red's lost villagers, for sure. But the trades have now gone in his favor. And it's very, very difficult if you've already tried to feudal all in a couple times to then keep attempting it and get a successful all in. Because you've already spent so many resources, right? So, gold was secured out here pretty much with double outpost. Actually on the deer now as well. So, you know, if you are attacking, I think I'm going to put this in the video later. Patrol routes on some of these resources is crucial. So, here we go. Defense 102 again. Yellow coming in. So, just not enough units this time, I think. I think the last time was probably the most units yellow had. And you can see with the town centers close together, which is what you need to do. When you build a second town center, you really should always put it within the range of your first town center so that you can defend against these feudal engagements. Ideally, if you're yellow, you're more so trying to position your army on this left side so it stops getting shot by the main TC. And we're going to get a fourth commitment from yellow here. But you can pretty much see the defense is in at this point, right? So at this point, it's going to be difficult to break red. I think the first push is the most important, so, you know, instead of going like 3 rams each time, if he was just doing the feudal all in, he should have gone like 5 the first time and brought it down, so. Now he's going for 4. Army value again in his favor, yellow's favor, but he's pushing into the double town center again. Giant repair on the backside, 17 villagers. More villagers pulled to burn the rams. Rams do go down. A lot of villagers dead from red, but, you know, yellow's getting peppered by both these town centers. So, behind this, since red has more economy and got gold, white tower goes up. And that's your successful defense. Now that you've had a successful defense over this period of time, you get your castle age upgrades, you counterattack, you win the game, right? So that's a kind of a prime example of how you can play 2TC. This game's gone super long, obviously, but now that you've had a good defense, you take your castle timing, you counterattack, you win the game. So I maybe went through that a bit fast, but I'm trying not to make this video 3 hours long. So that's kind of your defense 102 there. Again, key takeaways are textiles on the villagers, wheelbarrow if you can get it earlier. Second town center should be in range of the first town center just for backup. Army fights army in the defense. Villagers burn the rams down. Walls on the flanks. If you can get out on kind of these peripheral resources, that's super important and useful. And if you are attacking, you should set patrol routes on all these resources to deny them. So, hopefully that kind of defense 102 tutorial was helpful. If you have any questions about it, just let me know. Happy to answer them. See you fellas in the next section of the video. Thanks for watching. What's up, Conquerors? In this first section, I want to talk specifically about how to be faster in your gameplay. And that doesn't mean, you know, clicking around the map like this compulsively with your villagers, okay? None of that kind of shenanigans. What it really means is, how are you going to be more efficient in your movements? How are you going to play faster? Again, that doesn't mean necessarily clicking or moving units around faster. We're going to focus in on 2 specific key points, I think, on how to become faster. And I think over time, as you work on those, that's just a small part of what will kind of help you climb ladder. And one part we're going to talk about right here, and then in the next section we'll talk more about control groups. So first we're going to talk about just hotkeys and key mapping. And then in the next section, I'm actually going to pull up some of my controls and show you some of the controls I set, like setting control groups and key bindings and how all that works. Like right now, if I just hit 0, it's going to pull up my town center, right? If I hit H, it will cycle through the available town centers. So one key part that we want you to start doing, I want you to start doing in your games, is stop using the mouse so much, right? Like you always really want your left hand on your keyboard at all times and your right hand on your mouse at all times. And a lot of the time we can use the mouse just for, you know, basic select or moving our armies back and forth, moving units, whatever you want to do here. You know, we could go Shift Q the scout up in the Fog of War to come back to the TC. And you can't do that with your keyboard. But everything you can do with your keyboard, I really want you to start trying to do with your keyboard, right? So, here's an example. I select these villagers, and instead of selecting these villagers and then clicking mill with my mouse and then clicking to build over here, I just use the hotkeys, which in Age 1, if you click Q, it opens up a whole new list of hotkeys here. You click the mill, House of Wisdom, and my left hand never moved off the keyboard the entire time, right? My left hand was on the keyboard the whole time, used the hotkeys to place all of those buildings. Now, where this becomes really important is if you're doing a lot of clicking, around, it's just not as efficient, right? Especially once you have buildings up and you're trying to place a lot of buildings. If you're going down here and trying to find the icon in the menu and click on it and then click around where it needs to be placed, it's really just kind of an efficiency thing over time, right? So every building you're placing, you should really be using hotkeys to do that. And what I want to talk about next is it's the exact same thing when you're training units or queuing up technologies, right? Like, I never really want you clicking the mill and then clicking what technology you're going to research. I want you clicking the mill and then clicking W, right? Same with mining camp, lumber camp, blacksmith. You know, click the building, use the hotkey that's available to you. Click the building, use the hotkey. Click the building, use the hotkey. Your left hand should always sit on the left-hand side of your keyboard. I'm right-handed, so that's how that works. And I'm just using my left hand for my control groups and my hotkeys. My right hand is never leaving the mouse. So I kind of just sit here like this. And it's the same thing if I want to do researches in the barracks, the archery range, the stable, or I want to produce units. So I never want to be like selecting barracks and then coming over here and clicking spearmen. Just queue up the spearmen with Q, right? It's very natural for your left hand that's already over there to train some units with Q or R, E, whatever they might be at that time. It's super natural once you get used to it. You might already do that, right? So part of what also I'm going to show you in this segment, which we're going to talk about the bindings in the next little section I pull up, is your control groups. And control groups are very important. 1 for efficiency and then 2 for micro. We'll talk about micro later in the video, but first for control groups. Okay, I kind of always leave 1, 2, and 3, sometimes 4 open for units. So a lot of the time what I'll do is my cavalry will just be in a group that's 1. Sometimes if I have 2 groups of cavalry, I'll have them in 1 and 2 just for raiding. And if I need to split 1 off, I'll have a 3rd one. But a lot of the time what I end up doing is all my cavalry will be in group 1, control group 1. My infantry will be in control group 2. And then my siege, where the scout's going to be a pretend siege unit here, will be in control group 3, right? So it's very easy for me to identify what control groups are in what control groups and move them as needed. Cavalry in 1, infantry 2, siege 3. Now if I had siege workshops, you'd see that they're actually control group 4. So I always know if I want to build siege. I click on control group 4. Boom. Now I've got my siege out. My barracks, always control group 5. I know if I'm going to train any infantry, they're coming out of my barracks. My archery ranges, always control group 6. my stables, always control group 7. And these are all pre-made. I'll show you how to do that. My markets, since I trade a lot, always control group 8. I don't have any docks here, but I always control group my docks 9. And I always control group my town centers 10. Well, actually 0 here. So your town centers are going to be 0. So that's how I set mine up. And that way, let's say I'm out here fighting a battle. This is all about efficiency, right? We want things to be efficient. And you also want to know what your control groups are, because you don't want to have to think about what you have assigned as a control group when you're out here fighting a battle, right? So if I'm out here fighting a battle, yeah, and I've got my town centers rally out wood here, all I have to do, I'm out here microing, is just hit 0, build a couple villagers. I know I'm out here fighting. Then we'll hit 5, 6, 7, have the rally points out here, queue some guys up, keep fighting out here, queue some more guys up, build some more villagers, and you kind of see the efficiency of that. A lot of the time, you don't even have to take your eyes away from the screen. You're just out here fighting the whole time, right? So I do manually assign these guys, so you could change that as well, but I always manually assign the infantry and cavalry siege to their own control groups, just because I switch it up a lot. If I'm going full cav, I'll have different cav groups. So that's different, but my siege workshops are always 4, racks always 5, archery range always 6, stable always 7, markets always 8, docks always 9, town centers always 0. So what you want to try, if you're not already doing this, and I'm sure some of you have been doing this a long time, right? Like your hotkey guys. I know I have friends and people I play with and people on ladder, and I was even Conqueror 3 for a long time before I was really using a lot of hotkeys. So if you're not already doing those, for efficiency's sake, it's going to really speed up your game. Because think of all the times you're going around, you're having to click things manually with your mouse when your left hand really should be doing that work, right? Like you might set rally points with your mouse still, but your left hand on your keyboard should be doing all the building, unit production, everything like that. Anything that's got a hotkey, your left hand should be doing. So I hope that's helpful. This is just kind of a building block for our next section where we're going to talk about control groups and key bindings. And once we get through that, we'll get into some more interesting stuff like micro and some different sections. So stay tuned and we'll jump on to the next section. Thanks for watching. What's up, Conquerors? So to piggyback off that last section where we talked specifically about hotkeys and control groups, now I'm going to kind of show you how to set those if you're not already doing those. If you're already doing those and you kind of don't need this tutorial, you can jump to the next section. I'll have everything chaptered out in the YouTube video for you, so it's easy to find. But if you don't understand this section, or you just kind of want to see how I have things set up, I was going to give you a quick walkthrough of the settings. So really in any menu that you're in Age of Empires, down in the bottom right, you'll have your little cog wheel, which are your settings. And when you pull those up, mainly what we're going to talk about is under view and map controls, but there's really a lot of different things that you can do in the settings. You should probably scroll through them if you've never done that. So a lot of people actually use a lot of rotate camera. I don't, but a lot of people use rotate camera just to see where they need to build farms or spacing in their base, things like that. I'm really going to kind of pull up view and remap controls and show you guys a few things. So in unit selection, this is kind of where we get to unit and building selection. You can set up a lot of different key bindings in here that can be shortcuts in your games. So easiest example is select all units is Control-Shift-A. So if you're going to select every single unit on the screen, you'd use Control-Shift-A. And you can do that. Sometimes we laugh about when you're just going to send it as an all-in, you just Control-Shift-A everything. So there's a ton of different options in here. There's not a whole lot in this specifically that I use, but there's a lot of cool options you could set if you were going to use them. Like select all villagers. Cycle through villagers gathering food, wood, gold, stone. You could set all those. I do set and use select all traders just because I end up trading a lot with Mongols. You know, if someone's attacking the traders, I want to be able to select all the traders immediately and move them to a new position, send them to a new market, whatever the case might be, right? Kind of same thing with select idle villagers or select all villagers. Sometimes you just need to pull all the idle villagers or all villagers, so it's kind of nice to have that. There's a lot of different key bindings in here you could set, where you could be selecting specific religious units or military units, cycling through units. I have actually a select all cavalry set with tab. I didn't really do that with infantry just because I set them manually, but this is a very easy way to be more efficient, right? Like, you could be much more efficient if you set some of these key bindings and really started using them in your games. Like, select all range infantry is probably great for kiting, right? You could even probably set all your ranged infantry to, like, control group 1. And then, as soon as a ranged infantry comes out of the archery range, they're already in that control group. And then you just press 1 anytime you want to move your ranged infantry back and forth. So that's pretty cool, right? So building selection's what I use a lot more than unit selection, just because I'm a little picky about my units. So I have some different select all buildings as far as the function keys go here. Cycle through town centers is H. I don't really cycle through individual buildings mostly, but you can if you'd like to do that. Where I start really using a lot of these key bindings, which I find ultimately useful, is any town centers that are yours on the map. You know, I'll select with 0. Any barracks that are mine on the map is 5. Archery range stables. So that's all dynamically built buildings, new buildings, past buildings. Same with siege workshops. So, you know, I skip religious buildings, keeps blacksmiths, stuff I don't care about as much. Though, I will say, sometimes I lose my blacksmith in university, so not a bad idea to set those. Docks at 9, markets at 8. I also did some more unique items at 9, you know, because I'm not going to have docks on every map. So my Uvu also gets selected with 9, just because that'll get lost. My military schools, if I'm playing Ottoman, at 9. My mercenary houses is Byzantine at 9. And there's some unique buildings down here that you could do that with that could help you out, I think, a lot efficiency-wise if you started using those. So you've got all your control group items here. These are all pretty much default set. So some of these control groups I've set up in building selection like we talked about with select alls. If you don't do that, this just shows you all the different control groups that are available. And then lastly, but not least, for our team gamers, just throwing out here that you have 3 different pings. I assume, you know, solo this matters not at all. Team games, if you're playing with randoms, this is probably pretty freaking important. You, instead of having to type in chat, you've got your attack ping, defend ping, notify ping. So, you know, if someone's getting raided or you want to see something on the map, notify ping or defend ping. Trying to defend like somebody's base, defend ping, trying to push somewhere, attack ping. I assume these are all super useful in team games when you're playing with randoms rather than trying to like hit enter and type to the team and stuff. That's probably pretty annoying, right? Last item I was going to point out might actually be in game instead of camera. Actually, let's back out of this. So there are 2 camera views. I use what's called panoramic view, which gives you more of an eagle's eye view of the game when you're in game, right? The hitboxes, which means when you're clicking on units or clicking on gold or really any object in the game, are kind of shit in the panoramic view, so that's the downside. But the big upside is you see a lot more on the map. Like you just have a more zoomed out view than the classic view. So you can use either, just throwing it out there if anybody ever wants to change that. You know, you can always flip back and forth between them and see kind of what fits your style best. I know some guys that use classic view. I know some guys that use panoramic. I think it just depends on, you know, what you prefer, how you like using it. And that's pretty much a wrap up of the control groups and key bindings. It's a bit drier at the beginning of this video, but I still think it's really important to kind of talk about and understand. And I think, you know, you start using these key bindings, hotkeys, control groups, the speed that you have when you're playing in game will just increase, right? So it's not always about the number of actions per minute as it is your efficiency in your actions. And so that's kind of what we're trying to do here. You're trying to become more efficient, so you really need to be using hotkeys and control groups. So now that we're through that drier part, we're going to start talking about some more interesting, and I think this is going to be an interesting section about how to take better fights, how to not overextend with your army, when to take fights. And I think that's going to be super helpful just for, you know, your kind of general RTS strategy. So looking forward to that, and we'll jump into the next section. What's up, Conquerors? In this section, I want to specifically talk about how and when to take engagements, because I think this is really critical. I think most players in the game, including myself at times, are bad at taking engagements. Like, you take unfavorable engagements, you take engagements when you shouldn't, you take engagements too early, too late, outside of your defensive structures. So first I want to talk about what are the core principles of taking engagements, what I think, you know, the core principles are. Then I want to talk about when should you take engagements. And lastly, I'm going to talk about when you should not take engagements. Okay? So I've come up with, I just made this up from all of my gameplay, 5 principles of engagements. Alright, so principle number 1 of taking engagements is not overextending with your army. Now, what I mean by that is, if you haven't scouted an easy way to overextend with your army is have your army in the opponent's base when you don't have critical mass to beat him, right? That's an easy example. Now, what I mean by that is, if you don't have enough to actually beat your opponent's army and you're in their base, that's an overextension. Because they'll continue making units, they have that defensive advantage, their units will go immediately into their army, your units have to walk across the map to join the army. That's an overextension of your army. And a lot of the times can lead to your army getting destroyed, which, whether you lose in that moment or later in the game, that will be the cause of your loss. So, the number 1 core principle of an engagement is stop overextending with your army. It's not good. Okay? The number 2 core principle of an engagement, and I'm going to show an example of this in a little bit, is you always want critical mass before you take an engagement. So an easy example of this is, let's say you're building archer mass or knight mass or mangadai, you know, units that are not necessarily overpowered by themselves, but are overpowered when they're in a critical mass of units. So a critical mass of archers, for example, would be when you have enough archers that you can one-shot an enemy spearman. That's a critical mass of archers. An even larger critical mass of archers would be if you could one-shot a horseman. Okay, so there are different levels of what I would call critical mass. You know, two Mangadai are not a game record, but 25 Mangadai will end somebody else's game. That's kind of critical mass. So you kind of take skirmishers, you try to take good trades in the game. That's what you should be trying to do. You shouldn't be taking fights willy-nilly early, right? You try to pick off some opponent's army, villagers if you're lucky, and you try to build your critical mass up. Once you can get to that critical mass, then you take fights. Number 3 core principle of engagements is scouting the enemy army. If you don't scout the enemy army, you're setting yourself up for failure. I'll just tell you that now. If you're not scouting the enemy army, you're going to lose a ton of games. Right? Some of the better players, they'll hide what army composition they're making to surprise you, but easy example is, maybe you're doing a Zhug New Rush and you don't scout your opponent, and then they encircle you with 20 horsemen and kill you. Or you're doing one of those strategies with Ayubid where you go Dervish Desert Raider and you don't scout your opponent, and then you get surrounded by 15 horsemen and you lose everything. It's always important to scout the enemy army. You don't really know what composition you need to make until you've scouted the enemy army. So until you've scouted the enemy army, you really shouldn't be taking any type of engagement. You never go into an engagement blind. Your army should always have a scout with it. And that's a common issue I see even at the highest levels of the game. Core principle of engagement number 4 is if you can't win a fight, raid. Okay? We'll talk about when you have to take fights a little later, but in general, if you can't win the big fight, why take it? Right? Only in critical situations should you take the big fight if you're going to lose it. If you're going to lose the big fight, just leave. Raid your opponent. Try to wear down their economy. By raiding your opponent, the idea is you'll wear down their economy and force their army to pull back to their base. Okay? So, if you can't win the big fight in the middle of the map, don't throw away your units into it and then subsequently lose the game. Now, something to be careful about if you're going to go the raiding route, which is my core principle number 5, is stop throwing units away. This is something I see that's super common, and most of the time is just a result of players having difficulty multitasking. But if you've got spears, protecting a resource, don't let the enemy archers sit there and pick them all off, right? If you're raiding with horsemen or knights or something like that, don't let them get caught by the 10 enemy spears guarding the gold mine, right? So what I see happen very often with players, especially lower league players, is they just throw their units away. Like, they create the units, they kind of, for lack of a better term, YOLO them out into battle. Like, here you go, guys, run into battle, I don't care what happens to you, they all die, and the opponent barely loses anything. So we need, building units costs resources, and it costs production time. It's very difficult to get those units back on the battlefield, right? And in good positions. So try to stop throwing your units away, and you'll be able to win a lot more of the big engagements in the middle of the map. So those are kind of my 5 core principles of taking engagements here. Don't overextend. Get critical mass. Scout the enemy army. If you can't win the big fight, raid. Stop throwing your units away. Now we're going to transition from these 5 core principles of taking engagements, and we're going to transition into when should you be taking engagements. Like, when's the right time to go on the attack and take an engagement. So we just talked about the core principles of engagements, but when do you want to force engagements? So when do you actually want to go out and attack your opponent and make them fight you, right? It's a really interesting question, and of course this is super variable, right? This is just my opinion on things. Everybody has a different way of doing things. But some of these you're going to look at and say, that's obvious, right? It's obvious, but then when you're in your game and you're multitasking, so many things are going on, and most people don't follow these 4 rules I have on when you should force engagements. So it's something I see even at the highest level at times. People don't take engagements, or they take bad engagements, and it causes them to lose games, including myself, right? And a lot of the time I know it. I'll take a bad engagement and then I'll say, bah, just lost the game on that one. So I have 4 kind of key tips on when you should be taking engagements. One's when victory is certain. So if your army can beat their army, you take the engagement. It's really as simple as that. Now, you might have a hard time knowing whether your army can beat their army. And I'm going to be honest with you, it really comes just with playing more, right? Like, the more you play, the more you know what units beat what units, what compositions beat what compositions. And I pass as much knowledge as I can to the viewer, but I can't pass everything that's in my head, right? I can't pass every army composition I know that beats every army composition in my head, because it's so variable depending on the game and location. So you really only want to force engagements when you know you're going to win the engagement, right? Like, you don't really want to keep attacking your opponent and forcing an engagement when you're just losing repeatedly. That just causes you to lose the game. And I know that's common sense, but I know a lot of people don't do that in their games. So, second point is when your base is secure. So, if you keep forcing engagements but your base isn't secure, you're super vulnerable to counter raids. That can be game ending. It can really hurt you. And that's actually my greatest quality, is when someone's pushing my base, when they're trying to force engagements with me, I counter raid and I win the game off killing their entire economy. So you really should only be pushing and really taking fights when you've got a secure base. You got some defenses, some walls, something that's going to prevent a total wipeout of all your villagers if they roll through with some cav. So, number 3 on when do you want to force engagements? When they're unprepared. So, this is more of a broad point, which can be applied in many ways. Unprepared, generally in the sense that I mean here, is when they're not ready for your unit type. So let's say they have like archers and horsemen. You just hit castle, you start making knights. Go ahead and take fights, right? Like, their archers and horsemen are not going to beat your knights. Go ahead and take the fights with the knights that you have. You want to take engagements when your enemy's unprepared for what you have. So generally, that's by having some sort of unit that they cannot counter at the time. You go ahead and take the fight before they have the counter. Now, that being said, there are other small situations like, you can use archers to constantly pick off their units while they're not paying attention, or get in a big mango shot while they're multitasking somewhere else. Like, there's a lot of things you can do to hit your opponent when they're unprepared. Like, multi-prong attack, you attack on the front with your army and you raid in the back with cav. That's still kind of hitting your enemy when they're unprepared. The 4th time you're going to take fights, and you're going to take these fights regardless of whether victory is certain or not certain. Like, you could know you're going to lose a battle, but sometimes you have to take fights. And I like classifying this as when the battlefield situation is over critical territory, right? If the battlefield is your main town center, you're just going to have to take a fight there. Like, if we're talking about a solo game, if your main town center goes down, your other landmarks by it, you're at risk of just losing the game, right? So sometimes you have to take these engagements, even if you know you're going to lose them, when that situation is critical. Another example, which you'll see pros do, is if they're going to get pushed off gold, a lot of the time they'll just take the fight there, right? Like, that's a lot of the time what they view as the critical situation of the game. They have to have this gold. They're going to take the fight regardless. Try to win the fight, but knowing, knowing that they're probably going to lose the fight. So those are kind of my 4 key examples of when you should be taking engagements. So when you know you're going to win the fight, when your base is already secure so you can take engagements out on the map, when the enemy's unprepared for what you have, what you're about to hit them with, and then kind of when you have to take fights, right? So we really only ever want to take fights when we're going to win them, but if it's absolutely critical so that you don't lose the game, sometimes you're forced to take the fight there, right? Now, the next thing I want to talk about is when to avoid engagements, right? So that's really just as critical as these other two parts. You just don't want to take bad engagements. If you take bad engagements, the army value and destroyed value in favor of your opponent's going to continuously go up. Like if we were looking at a line graph and, you're blue, they're red, the more bad fights you take, your army just can't recover. Their army will keep getting bigger, as will yours, but yours will forever be behind them if you're taking bad engagements. And that's just kind of the snowball effect of RTS. If you take bad fights, you're going to be behind, right? So I kind of have three main points here for when to avoid engagements. So number one is you want to avoid engagements when you don't have a counter to the enemy troops or they have a counter to you. So let's say, like, for some reason in this hypothetical scenario, you went into spearmen to defend your base, expecting they were going to make knights, but then they just went full archer, and so they'll just beat you in a straight-up fight right now. So that's just an example of you just don't want to take that fight, right? Like, if the opponent's got a lot of counters to what's in your army, you avoid the fight until you can build some different troops in your army. Right? You just don't take the engagement. The only time you would take the engagement is if it was over a critical resource or over your main town center. Otherwise, you just don't fight. Literally don't fight. Like, don't throw your troops away. So, second key point here is, and again, this is going to seem like common sense, but I see people do it over and over and over again. Don't engage. If you have a smaller army than your opponent's army, stop engaging, right? It's a little different if, let's say, you have like 20 knights against 25 archers, right? There's always an exception. But generally, if you've got a smaller army and a weaker army, don't take the fight, right? Unless it's a critical moment where you have to, do not take the fight. And if you do take the fight, take it under your defensive structures so that you have an advantage. But stop walking outside of your base with a smaller army and running into the opponent's base where they have a bigger army than you. They're just going to kill you. Okay? So that's kind of a prime time. Avoid engagements under that scenario. And number three, this one take with a grain of salt, because if you're doing like a push with siege, this doesn't necessarily apply. Or if you have overwhelming army superiority, this doesn't apply. But generally, do not fight under enemy defensive structures. If you have an equal-sized army or a slightly stronger army, you cannot win that fight under enemy defensive structures. You will take heavy losses, and it could turn the game in the opponent's favor. Okay? Enemy defensive structures include multiple outposts, town centers, keeps especially. So if you have plus or minus, a little bit of the same army value, do not take fights under enemy defensive structures. You will lose the battle, and that may lead to you losing the game. So you want to avoid engagements in those particular scenarios. Now, we've kind of gone through principles of taking engagements, when to force engagements, and when to avoid engagements. And I kind of want to finish this section off, even though I know the video is getting long at this point. We're going to end up doing a how to get to Conqueror Part 3, because there's a lot of other things I could talk about. I'm going to show a little bit of a clip from a pro tournament. This is not to criticize any pro players. They're all a lot better than me. But just kind of applying some of these principles I just talked about to a game I watched in particular. And then after that, we'll probably wrap things up here. So we'll go ahead and get on to that clip and see what you guys think about it. Thanks for watching. What's up, Conquerors? So, I have a little replay review here, let's call it, of a game between Marine Lord and Lucifron, actually, where I want to take the principles we just talked about and when do you take engagements, how do you take them, how do you win games taking those engagements, and apply it to one of the pro games from the last EGC TV tournament. I want to make very clear, this is not a criticism of either pro player. They would destroy me 10 times out of 10 with any civilization that they chose. So, these guys are much better than me. Now, that doesn't mean that they don't make mistakes in game. And the one clarification of this is Lucifron does end up winning this game. Now, he makes a lot of mistakes, I would say, in taking a lot of these engagements. So, where we are in the game before I hit play is Marine Lord has a large feudal army. Lucifron has hit Castle Age and is making Lancers and would like to, push his tech advantage and Lancers in to win the game with them. And kind of based on what we just talked about and learned on when you take engagements, the key problem with what Lucifron does in several of these battles is he does not have critical mass of Lancers to push and win this. But he repeatedly commits Lancers to the battle, hoping that he'll get good trades. But instead, what happens is Marine Lord hangs in this game for a really long time and kills a lot of Lancers. And Marine Lord's the one who ends up taking a lot of good trades down in tech. So that's why we're watching this video, because, these are two of the top guys, right? Two of the best players in the game. And I always think we can learn a lot from watching their videos. One, in kind of the great tactics and fights that Marine Lord has here. And where Lucifron could have been a little better in this game, he ends up winning it anyways. And how he handles his knights. So I am going to go ahead and play it. And, basically what we see here is, he's got some knights, but Marine Lord's got a very large amount of Ghazi Raiders, which deal, a small amount of extra bonus damage against the Lancers. The biggest issue you're going to see repeatedly is that Marine Lord has the ability, since he has more units, to surround Lucifron's units and just kind of overwhelm them with damage, right? The archers snipe out all of Lucifron's spears, and then it's just Lancers. And we're kind of repeatedly seeing these battles where Lucifron, again, Lucifron's a really good player. I don't want to overly criticize here. But he just kind of throws away his Lancers, right? So, he probably lost 6 or 7 Lancers in that fight. Marine Lord probably lost an equal amount of Ghazi Raiders, but that's a bad trade, right? And actually in this replay, you can't see, this is kind of my poor positioning, you can't see the destroyed value, but it's about double in Marine Lord's favor at this point in the game, right? So what Lucifron was trying to do there was just push because he had Lancers and he knew Marine Lord hadn't built up spears yet. It just didn't work out because Marine Lord had a large force and Lucifron did not have critical mass of Lancers, right? If he had had critical mass of Lancers, he wins that fight. Now, Marine Lord's begun adding in spears and Lucifron's going to have a problem against the tri-composition. So, I did talk about in our when to take engagements. You have to take engagements when it's critical. I would say, and obviously Lucifron agrees, this area, this gold mine is critical to Lucifron. If he loses his gold mine, he loses the game. So you can see he takes a big stand here in front of the gold mine, does a great job. I think this, in another one of our core concepts we talked about, is probably a vast overextension from Marine Lord. He really doesn't, it says he has 9 spears, but you can see they're not up here at the front. So if he had the spears with him, he could probably take that fight. But what happened was his Ghazi number got absolutely freaking decimated because he didn't have the units that he needed at the front. So, you know, Lucifron loses an engagement in the middle originally because he doesn't have critical mass. Marine Lord overextends, loses a massive portion of that army, which was mostly Ghazi Raiders. That was like 16 or 17 Ghazi Raiders that died. Lucifron, another core tenet of what we talked about on when to take engagements, knew that that gold mine was critical to his success in the game. He knew he couldn't lose this gold. So he takes a fight right in front of it and wins the fight. Important thing to consider is anytime you're playing or watching a game, Defender's Advantage is very strong. And Defender's Advantage is the ability to rally out units quickly from your unit producers. If you're pushing into the opponent's base, you just can't do that, right? You just don't have that quick Defender's Advantage. And what we see here, what we're going to see, I'm kind of prepping you here, is we're going to see Lucifron go into Knight Archer and Marine Lord go into triple comp, which is Spearman, Ghazi, Archer. Now, triple comp almost always beats double comp. But Lucifron is in Castle Age, so there's a consideration there. You know, Marine Lord kind of has to make a few decisions here. Does he try to follow up to Castle right now? Does he just push in Feudal while he has numerical advantage? He might be worried if he saves resources and goes to Castle that Lucifron will be able to kill him. So he gets a nice find here on the villagers. But you can see they're both kind of remaxing their army. And Marine Lord's got a freaking massive army right now, right? Clearly Lucifron's out of food. Mostly out of food. So again, you know, diving this hard, potentially an overextension by Marine Lord here, though there are a lot of villagers on the woodlines. And the thing about attacking the opponent in their base is your full army's never here, right? Like Marine Lord has 56 units, but how many of those are streaming across the map or in his base? He's probably only got like 20 right there. So that's kind of one of our core principles of not overextending with your army. I think Marine Lord is going to get some villager picks here, luckily. But if he didn't find those villager picks, Lucifron could just destroy that half of the army because he overextended with it. We don't see this in the replay, but Lucifron actually did try to wall his villagers in up there, which was a nice little play. And the destroyed value is about even again. Sorry, I'm not sure where my screen went there for a second. I apologize for that. But I'm not refilming just because of that. So, moral of the story there was Lucifron's able to clean up Marine Lord's army at the top because of an overextension of units. So, there's two more real engagements I kind of want to watch here. And I'm just letting the video play out. Because there's two times that I'm not sure exactly what the issue was here, but there's two times that Marine Lord overextends. One of them's coming up here. He probably thinks he can take the fight, but Marine Lord does have triple composition, so he just needs to get the Ghazi Raiders on the archers, spears on the lancers, and he wins, right? Archers shoot the archers, or just deal some DPS from the back. Marine Lord cannot really take a fight because he has nothing to deal with the Ghazi Raiders. Like, the Lancers do beat Ghazi Raiders on paper, but the Lancers cannot protect the Archers because there are spears. So you have to try to, this is an overextension. This is what I'm getting at. He moved out of his base with a much smaller army to take on a much larger army that had triple composition. The Ghazis do significant damage here to the Archer mass. And the Gazis are faster than the Lancers, so they can continually run past them and kind of envelop them, as we're about to see here. And this was another insanely good fight for Marine Lord off of Lucifron overextension, right? You really want to avoid doing that in your game. And the other thing I'm going to point out, Lucifron never had a scout with his army at any point during these fights that I've been watching. And I don't know if that led to some of the issues, but you should always have a scout with your army so that you can see what the opponent has before you overcommit. So Marine Lord's going to make a push here. He's only got 10 spears max. You know, maybe a bit of a problem against this Lucifron Lancer blob. There are enough archers to kind of work that few spears down. Once you're just a Gazi archer, the Lancers can defend against that pretty darn well. So Marine Lord is going to push here, but, you know, with all the stables around to pump out more Lancers, not enough spears on the front. You know, again, we're watching what I consider to be the best player of the world. He thinks he's got it, but it's still an overextension because Lucifron's pumping out Lancers, right? And we're kind of, this is a really, really interesting game to me because we're watching two of the best players kind of repeatedly like overextend and lose their armies, which you don't see a whole lot, right? This is like kind of rare to see. They're both trying to end each other's games, they just can't do it. So Marine Lord pulls out to save the archers to kind of reset on the front line here. Circles more Lancers. I mean, you see this from Marine Lord over and over. And this is actually a really good tip in your engagements. If someone's chasing you like that and you think you can kill their army, just kind of like encircle them with your army and then fight. It works super well. And I think we're going to watch one more of these engagements again. Because, again, the core, and I'm going to keep saying this, the core idea we talked about when you take engagements is you only take engagements that you're pretty certain you're going to win, right? You don't overextend into the opponent's base. That's always a no-no. Alright, I had to pause real quick because Twitch was trying to get me with an ad there. So, we're going to watch one more engagement here. And like I said, Lucifron ends up winning this game by just going Mass Archer, which was kind of funny. But Lucifron, again, Knight Archer against Triple Comp. And we always kind of talk about we want to avoid fights where we're out-countered, right? That's kind of the two of the things I talked about was avoiding fights where you can't necessarily deal with the counter. And we kind of seen this problem every time Lucifron pushes. Like, he pushes with Knight Archer, but he can't really take a straight-up engagement because the Gazis will get onto the archers and kill the archers. And you need the archers to kill the spears. And the Knights can't protect the spears because the Knights can't protect the archers because the spears will kill the Knights. So, like, Lucifron's had an issue in a lot of these fights where he doesn't have the appropriate army composition. Like, in theory, I'm with him, it should work. Like, Lancers should just kill everything that Marine Lord has, but Marine Lords, it's feudal spears, but there's still 24 of them, right? And 21 Gazis. So, we're going to watch another fight here. And what I've kind of generally been trying to get at while we've been watching this is there's been a lot of throwing away of units, like on Lucifron's side, mostly because we're about to watch the same thing happen that we've watched happen a few times, where the Lancers, really can't defend. The archers get encircled by the Gazis. It's death, just game over for the archers. And then the spears can get on top of the Lancers, and it's going to be, a wipe on the army. So we've kind of seen that repetitiveness over and over. And the only reason Marine Lord's even remotely in this game is because he's been taking fantastic trades. So it just goes to show you, like, taking good trades can easily win or lose you the game, right? Like, you might not think about it in the game, but I mean, that was a terrible trade for Lucifron. No offense to him, he ends up winning the game. He's a great player, but that was an awful trade. I mean, Marine Lord's using feudal units and beating his Castle Age units. And at its core, that's because a couple things we talked about with when you take engagements. He hasn't been properly, I would say, utilizing the counter system here. And he has not built up enough critical mass of Lancers to take the fights is the other issue. So it was a lot of Lancers, but, you know, you were going against 60 Delhi units. So there are limits. Like, if the amount of Lancers that have gone down in this game, if he had been able to pull some back, heal them up with the monks, or just save them for better fights, raided with him to keep Marine Lord in his base, like, I think he ends this game a lot earlier. And now we kind of see a stand and fight from both sides, and neither are sure whether they can really win here. So that's just kind of a clip I wanted to show you. Like, it's very hard to master when you should take engagements, but I think if you really take the tips that I gave you and you try to work them into your gameplay, it's not that you have to do all of them at the same time, right? Like, you could take one or two, work on them in your games. If you can get better about taking engagements, you're going to win a lot more games. Because you see a lot of players just throwing away units, myself included. I 100% do that and have to be better about it. I throw away units when I'm raiding. So I kind of just gave y'all a clinic on taking engagements. I hope that was helpful. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, think there's better ways to do it, just let me know in the comments, and happy to respond to it, and hope that was helpful. We'll wrap things up here. I think that's going to be it for this video. It's been a long one, and I don't want to, blow the video out of proportion. So I'll wrap things up in a conclusion, and we'll get to it. Alright, so to wrap everything up, we've gone through a lot in this video. We've gone through mastering the early game. We've gone through making siege, how to utilize siege to win battles. We've gone through learning how to defend under pressure, Defense 101 and 102. We've learned how to play faster, using hotkeys and control groups, not your mouse. And we've kind of done a clinic on when to take engagements. So rather than small things like the original Gold to Conquer, a lot of this was more like theory and how to win fights in your games, rather than kind of overarching, like, this is how you gather food, this is how you gather wood. Like, these were more, I would say, advanced concepts than the first video. So if you never watched the first video, go watch the first one. Based on the amount of things I could still add to this video, I'm thinking there's going to be a third one at some point of Gold to Conquer Part 2. Maybe of smaller things that you can do in your gameplay to get better. Like, by using a market, or building walls, or patrol routes. Like, some smaller things in that video rather than the big concepts. As far as this video goes, if you've watched this far, really appreciate you watching. I hope it was really helpful to you, and that this will help you improve in your games. I spend a lot of time on these videos, so if you could, just drop a like on the video. If you're not subscribed to the channel and you've watched this far, I would really appreciate you subscribing. And totally optional, but if you want to support the channel, you can click join below this YouTube video to become a member for the channel. Totally optional, no pressure. So if y'all want to see more content like this, just let me know in the comments below. Happy to continue making it. I just kind of have to plan it out because it takes some time. But thanks everybody for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.